All right, happy Friday, everyone. Thank you for joining our second FSI Fridays. I'm one of your co-hosts, joined by my colleague, Joe Hansen. Joe Hansen, can you tell us what FSI Fridays are all about?
Yeah, thanks, Edwin. So FSI Fridays is our commitment to bringing topics that are relevant to financial services organizations across the Microsoft solution set. So we'll be talking to various different experts and people from our product group to even customer scenarios as well, showcasing how financial services customers are leveraging our Microsoft technologies.
No, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Johansson. So just to go through some of the logistics, we'll spend 30 minutes talking about insider risk and communications compliance. We're going to leave the last 15 minutes to address any burning questions, and definitely please use that Q&A section that we'll monitor during the presentation, so we might ask your questions live. So Johansson, I'm really excited to share about today's topics. Want to kick it off with some background and context?
Sure thing, Edwin. So we are joined by Christophe and Raman, who are really here to talk to us about how to minimize insider risk through the risky activity detection and investigations and actionable insights. And this is something that is top of mind for our financial services organizations, where managing and minimizing risks really starts with understanding the types of risks that are found in the modern workplace. And risks are driven both from external events and factors that are really outside of the direct control of IT. And so other risks are driven from internal events and employee activities. These things can be eliminated and avoided. And we're joined by our members of our product group to hear and talk to us about insider risk. Welcome, Christophe, and welcome, Raman.
Thank you. Definitely a pleasure to be here. Happy Friday, everyone, and happy any day for everyone who's going to watch the recording. But again, I'm on the security and compliance engineering team, and it's definitely a pleasure to talk about this topic, which is top of mind for all of you, hopefully, on this who are watching this webinar.
Yes, and same here. I'm on the Microsoft 365 product marketing team, and I work closely with Christophe and others on the engineering side, and looking forward to having a discussion today.
Thanks, guys. So, Christophe, could you just give us a quick rundown? Why insider risk? What are customers seeing, and how are we helping customers stay protected?
Yeah, so basically there's multiple compliance requirements that financial services customers need to have, and we've got a number of solutions. But today, what we're going to focus on is specifically this notion of insider risk, where again we've got a dedicated set of solutions to tackle this problem. But at the high level, think of insider risk as, at the end of the day, potentially your risk is coming from within. And what we mean by that is your employees, for instance, for the past 3 months might have been under some stress. They have a different working environment, and by mistakes, they might be sharing something that they're not supposed to do, might get carried away because having a bad day, the dogs are barking in the background, the kids are screaming, and they're trying to do their day job and so forth. And so they might be using some foul language or not being so nice to their peers. So the idea is potentially, sure, you can have nation states and things like that, risk on the outside, but insider risk is all about your employees. And again, like I said, it could be intentional risk, but quite often, or most of the cases, unintentional. Like I said, Christophe getting carried away or having a bad day and doing something that he didn't want to intentionally put the company at risk, but he still crossed the barrier, and we need to correct that. And so this slide is kind of like gives you kind of a spectrum of all those risks, and alluded to some, but typically in your world of financial services, things like obviously IP theft, fraud, collusion, insider trading, obviously some of those things it's required. I'm assuming most of you are in the US, but obviously if you're in Canada, that's okay too. But in the US, you get the SEC, you get FINRA. In Canada, you got IRA that say you need to look for those patterns like insider trading. So it's not even optional. But like I said, there's other patterns here where you're not regulated, but typically you still do it by nature of the sensitive information that you handle on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, these are absolutely risks that are very top of mind for financial services leaders. So what are some of the challenges that your customers are facing, or our customers are facing, when it comes to trying to solve for this?
Yes, so in the past, like actually this slide gives you a couple numbers, but like I said, the first thing that you take away is, this is top of mind. The story we tell everyone is Brett Arsenault, who's our CISO at Microsoft. We've interviewed him about a year and a half ago, and we asked him, hey, what keeps up you at night? And you would expect, nation state, hackers, people from the outside going in and doing mischievous activities. And actually his top of mind was insider risk. Microsoft employees, either a new hire or even a long-time hire, crossing the line. And again, at the end of the day, potentially putting the company at risk. So, and what's interesting is, with the whole COVID thing and the fact that now a big chunk of the workforce is now working from home. Again, for some people, maybe they let their guard down in terms of hygiene and being pretty strict about what they're sharing, not sharing. Even might leave their computer open, and they get people in the household that maybe shouldn't see what's on the screen and so forth. So I think not only that insider risk existed before, I think with the new way of working and the stress that all of us have been under, it probably exacerbated potentially people crossing the line. And the chart on the right is what I mentioned earlier. Like, I want to be very clear, it's not all bad, or people don't necessarily have a bad intent. It could be, hey, I'm sharing a document that's classified as sensitive to Raman, who's actually not part of that tented project or not part of that group, and he shouldn't see it. I just forgot or something. Or like I said, I'm using languages that just a code of conduct that's not acceptable per our employee charter. But again, because I'm having a long day, a bad day, and all of the above, I get carried away. So, I just need to be reminded that this is not acceptable at our organizations and move on.
Great. So when we think about insider risk, how does insider risk address both that malicious behavior and that inadvertent behavior? I think you touched on some of that there, but I understand that some of these many of our customers have many different solutions to try to accomplish this, but we again are seeing real challenges in terms of how they can achieve those.
Yes. So historically, and I think you guys are going to get the slides, but the three kind of legacy tools that people use in the past: UEBA, UAM, or user activity monitoring, and data loss prevention, DLP. Each one cover pieces of the puzzle, and again, those solutions were great. But at the end of the day, when you look at us, how we monitor for insider risk, each of those had some gaps. So what we ended up doing at Microsoft is building a custom solution. And based on those learning, that's when we say, well, if we build it for us, because none of those solutions would handle the problem end to end, then why don't we build a product and give that to our customers? So that's kind of like the background. The idea is, and you'll see us when we demo, and it's also the feedback we've got is, for instance, some of those solutions are very security ops centric, so very IT centric. Now, when you think about an insider risk, whether it's Christophe doing some insider trading, or Christophe harassing someone, or Christophe colluding, at the end of the day, sure, maybe, or Christophe stealing something, maybe it starts with SecOps, but the people that are close to the problem, that are really going to say, yeah, Christophe is sharing information that's sensitive. Security or IT doesn't know that. Only the businesses will have that context. The fact that Christophe crossed the line in terms of your code of conduct policy, typically that's someone from human resources. The fact that Christophe crossed the line in terms of insider trading or collusions or political contribution, that's folks from compliance. And then you add on top of that, that typically if it is a bad behavior, it needs to be handled, you probably bring in legal. So none of those solutions were really catered end to end to handle, not just the detection, but the investigation and the remediation. And that's what we built in both solutions that you'll see next. So that, again, those personas that are going to see from end to end, it's not just security, it's not just IT, but we've expanded it to bring all those stakeholders so you can deal with those violations as they occur one by one.
That's great, Christophe. So, you talked about the various different aspects. There's the files aspect, but how do organizations address some of those risks that are associated to communication specifically? So like the emails and the IMs and things that we send.
So yeah, communication. Since I know the audience I'm talking to. Typically, think of it the primary need that you guys have is, again, to fulfill your regulatory requirements. So, in the industry for the past 2 decades, it's called proof of supervision. And so that's that solution that we've now called communication compliance. And the reason, you might say, hey, Christophe, you had a solution called supervision in the security and compliance. It's not called communication compliance, and why is that? And the simple reason is, yes, we want to give you definitely a tool so you can fulfill your regulatory requirement per FINRA 17A, blah, 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 in terms of insider training and so forth. But we also realize that an insider risk is not just Christophe crossing the line and giving a tip to Johnson on here's the next stock you should buy because I get a tip from someone at that company. It's also, like I said, code of conduct violation. So we want to give you a holistic picture of what's going on in those communications, not just people sharing sensitive things or crossing the line and potentially violating a regulation that abides to your industry, but also internally, Christophe crossed the line and is harassing this person, or even worse, Christophe is threatening to harm another employee. Again, typically, I would think for financial services, those are just not acceptable behavior. So that's why we rebranded it, the solution, so that sure you can caters to fulfill your proof of supervision requirement, but also to do code of conduct, which is that first scenario. And on the right, like I said, this is a team effort at your company, and it's not just a burden that needs to be carried by IT. And depending on the detections and, like I said, the end-to-end workflow, this is where you bring the compliance team, obviously, for regulatory compliance scenarios, but also human resources and legal, depending on the type of corporate policy violations that you detect.
No, that's great, Christophe. Can you tell us a little more about communication compliance, and then we'd love to see what it looks like shortly.
Yeah, actually, so I'll give you the rundown very quickly, and then I want to jump to a demo. But basically, again, we've learned from working with a lot of folks in your industry, not just in the US, but worldwide, and obviously folks in other industries, whether regulated or non-regulated, whether large or small. And that's what we've released back in February, shortly before RSA, which is the big annual security conference down in San Francisco. So this is the solution I'll show you in the demo is available in your tenant. So you can all start using it. But basically, again, the first pillar that we baked in the solution is, the key word there is intelligence. You know that the challenge when you want to detect pattern over communication is the volume of data. So you can't just look at keyword match or a lexicon, which is what the industry used in the past. Even that's still potentially going to generate a lot of what we call false positive. So that's key there. And obviously from, actually, I'll move on. I'll show you a lot of that stuff in the demo. And then the next point is what I mentioned. We know you're regulated. You need to get that checkbox with FINRA and SEC, but you also need to protect your employees and make it a safe and inclusive environment. And then the last piece is, like I mentioned, it's not an IT only problem. And the folks you're going to bring in, give them the tools to not only obviously detect, but also investigate and remediate. So that was the goal with those. So with communication compliance and the next one that Raman is going to show, which is to give you an end-to-end solution. You don't need to jump to another solution to then deal with it or to do something. It's all packaged in one tool. And that's what that flexible remediation for workflows means.
This is exciting. Christophe, we'd love to see how this works inside of action, in action. Do you mind just showing us a quick demo?
Yeah, let me go, and hopefully you can see my screen.
Sure can. Thank you.
Okay, so orient you a little bit. So this is demo tenant, but it's in production. So again, the call to action to all of you is to start looking at that solution. But here's the security and compliance, and yes, we have lots of solutions, and you can see here we got eDiscovery, DLP, and so forth. But here, where I'm on is the communication compliance solution that, like I said, we've released in February. So here, to orient you a little bit, we got a little dashboard with some alerts, some widgets that show you, just collapse the left nav, so some widgets on how many detections are we seeing and have they been remediated by your or supervisors and so forth. And so I'll show you quickly, I'll start with the insiders since you guys are in financial services. So I'll show you a policy in action. In this case, we get Nestor. So what you're seeing here is all the items that match the criteria that I set in my policy. So this is a policy to detect for insider trading. And in this case, I'm looking for both keyword match and regular expressions like routing number and stuff like that. So you can see here, I got Nestor having a discussion with his peers. And in this case, we got Yammer. And then you may say, oh, why is this text get flagged? We can easily show you we've matched some of the keywords, like in this case, a routing number and so forth. So we give you context of why this conversation get detected. The other thing that I want to stress, and this is in Yammer, but I could show you the same thing over Teams, is we're doing what we call conversation reconstruction, which is very key and very unique, which is we know those Yammer and those Teams are pretty chatty, but we want to give you the context of the full thread. Instead of you reviewing one instant message at a time, let's stitch it together so you get the full context and can then make decisions on what to do with Nestor or others. The other thing that we're doing is, we know that communication is not just first-party communication, even though we can do Yammer and email and Teams, but we also know that you care a lot about third-party communication because that's what the regulator is asking you to also monitor. So in this case, I've changed my filter, and then in this policy, I've ingested some instant Bloomberg messages, and this is just an example. But again, we've got in this case Megan, and you can see we have the same pattern. We know that instant Bloomberg is a chat, so there's a lot of back and forth. So we're doing that notion of conversation reconstruction to really help you as an investigator get all the pieces of the puzzle to make a decision on what to do with Megan. The other thing we're doing is, we're running machine learning to detect things like near duplicates. So if Megan had tried to outsmart the system and send one chat in Yammer, one in Instant Bloomberg, one in Teams, in this case, I only have one of each or two different chat in Instant Bloomberg, but we're showing you that, that same string occurred at different places. It might be different recipient, different timestamp, but it still looks very similar. So again, the idea is if you get thousands of those, really saving you, and you can also, that's an indicator also that Megan is a repeat offender. The other thing we give you is we keep track of all the history of all those remediation action that you've taken, and I'll get that to do next. So you can see that Megan is definitely not a first-time offender. And again, the fact that she sent multiple messages that violate my policy, the fact that she's done it in the past, might drive what do I do next. And there's a couple of things you could do. If Megan maybe was a first-time offender, I could have just sent her a notice and say, don't do this. This violates our policy. In this case, because it's severe, I can also escalate. So I'm logged in as myself, and maybe Adele, is my manager. Maybe she's the compliance lead, and I can just type a message, send that to Adele, and instead of Adele seeing all the items, she gets a link in an email, and she only sees the ones, so really saving her time to look at that. And then the most severe remediation action you can do is, in this case, again, repeat offender, past violations, and so forth. So I can just easily pass all those messages to my legal team for further investigations. So in our world, we do have obviously an eDiscovery solution. So it's all seamless. We package that and really saving times, from your legal team. They don't need to do a search all over on Megan. You've already narrowed down those 4 incriminating messages, and voila, they get a case created, and they can just further look at what Megan has been up to.
Christophe, this is really powerful stuff. Just the ability to go and detect all of this information and then streamline it, like you mentioned, into an eDiscovery case. Thank you very much for walking us through that.
No, you're welcome. I know very quickly, because I know, again, it's a requirement in your world, but do we have proof of supervisions on reports? Yes, we track all the activities that your reviewers do. We also track all the policy changes that we do. And next month, we'll be launching a bunch of reports to give you more insights in terms of the matches and top violators, most frequent keyword match, and so forth. So stay tuned as we update this solution. We're gonna be updating this solutions quite frequently. So stay tuned for more.
Fantastic, Christophe. Fantastic. So let's now take it over to talk about insider risk a little bit more, the insider risk management solution. So we know organizations have had challenges with IP theft and data leakage, and there are increased risks around remote work. Raman, do you mind just telling us about how these solutions can help our customers in financial services?
Yeah, so one of the other solutions that we have in our pillar is insider risk management. And so insider risk management, essentially what we do here is we are similar to communication compliance. We have a number of rich templates that help organizations easily get started. One of the things that, when you look at that fractured solution slide, there's a lot of different solutions that organizations are attempting to use to identify insider risks today. And it results in what we call a fractured approach, right? Because they're not really integrated together. There's complexity in trying to get the different signals. Most of them require an endpoint agent. And so oftentimes what we hear from customers is, hey, it's not only challenging for me to get started, but it's challenging for me to maintain the ongoing level of alerts I may be getting or not getting. And so what we've done first and foremost is built in a number of templates that allow you to quickly scope in the users that you want to look at in the policy and then move forward. So for example, we have a IP theft upon departing employee policy. Another one is a data leakage policy. And all you have to do is scope in the users and go forward. Secondarily here is really about privacy, and we'll see this more in the demo, but privacy is built into the product from the get-go. And then finally, end-to-end investigations. And that's meaning you have to, when you're talking about employees, you want to ensure that you're doing things that are in accordance with not only your corporate policies and your corporate culture, but also in accordance with the laws and the regulations that you may be subject to. So insider risk management is one of those solutions, is the solution that we have in Microsoft 365 that really kind of takes all of those different activities from endpoints from Microsoft 365, correlates them together to help you identify high risk activities and then take action on those.
Hey, Raman, that's super helpful. As you know, we're seeing a lot of remote work situations today, and again, sometimes this insider risk is unintentional. How does this help with the remote work that we're seeing, and is this something that you could show us?
Yeah, and that's great. So I'll go ahead and I'll jump to a demo. So let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
It is popping up. Thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, so you asked about remote work. And so one of the things that we deliver as part of insider risk management is the ability to capture signals without the need for an endpoint agent. So if you're using a Windows 10 machine build 1809 or higher, we're going to be able to get signals off of that endpoint. Furthermore, in a remote work environment, you may have machines that are unmanaged. And so the question we often get is, well, what about those machines? Like, how do you get signals? Well, the great part about this is that, you know, since your data is in Microsoft 365, you're using Microsoft 365 workloads such as SharePoint or Teams or OneDrive or Exchange. We're getting native signals through the Microsoft 365 audit logs. So we don't even need an endpoint agent there. We can actually tell you that somebody downloaded, you know, 50 SharePoint files or 50 files from SharePoint onto a machine. Once they got onto that machine, if they're in an unmanaged environment, we won't be able to see what happened there, but we will get all of the data prior to them going onto the machine. So from a remote work environment, we're definitely seeing a lot of uptick in customers utilizing insider risk management to help them identify high risk activities. So with that, let me just kind of show you a quick demo of insider risk management. Here you see the homepage of the solution. You've got different alerts. You've got different cases. You can see policies with the most activity. The other thing that you notice here is that all of the usernames are anonymized. And they're anonymized to ensure that there's no bias or discrimination. Like, for example, if I see, you know, Christophe's name pop up here, I might want to escalate that no matter what, right? But most organizations, I would say 99% of organizations, they love this feature because it allows them to move forward in terms of identifying risks objectively, right? And this is something that you can certainly turn on and off, but it's on by default. And so if I go into an alert here, I have the ability to look through different alerts. I see the alert severity that allows organizations to prioritize which alerts they want to look at, right? And I can click on a particular alert. I can see the user activity here in terms of the history of what's happening. And I'll go into this in more detail when we get to a particular case. So imagine here I go to a case, and so I've got a case of a potential IP theft. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that case. I see, I see a lot of history, and then all of a sudden I see a spike. And what the system is showing here is that there's a high risk. The score of for this particular user is fairly high, right? So 91 out of 100. There's a lot of things going on here, and I can go into the user activity bubble here, and I can see that I'm going to just filter back a little bit, and I'm going to apply that, and so I can see that this user has been doing a lot of different things. And one of the things that we know about insider risk is that predisposition to violating company policies is an indicator of future risky activity. If you're predisposed to violating policy, you're probably going to do it again. And so in this case, we see that, not only did this person have a previous insider risk case closed where they were essentially leaking data outside of the organization, but now if I look at what they did most recently, they downloaded files from SharePoint. They then moved those files from SharePoint onto, a USB stick, and then they basically submitted their resignation. One of the other things that you'll see here is that we're actually giving you more detail in terms of what kind of information was on those files. And that's something that you're likely not going to get from any of those other solutions as well. So we can show you here that, 200 or 2,300 files were copied to USB. There was a number of files that contained credit card information. Additionally, we had files that had confidential labels applied to them. So this is coming from the information protection capabilities within Microsoft 365. So if you're using Microsoft 365 information protection, we can consume those labels and we can tell you like, hey, this information was labeled as highly confidential. The risk is much higher. And so a lot of this is about not only the activity, but the context around the activity.
Yeah, Raman, this is really powerful. I mean, the whole user experience, to be able to see all of this, and even take this out of the hands of traditional IT, where they've had these logs in the past, but and maybe have multiple different solutions that have separate logs. This really takes all of the capabilities and logs and kind of marries it up into a very nice, clean dashboard where a risk officer could come in here and really assess the overall risk within an organization. Is there anything else that you'd like to show us?
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly show you, like, in this case, if I actually wanted to go in and look at a particular file, I can go in here and, and this is another powerful experience is not only do we tell you that, files contain confidential information, but then if you have the right permissions, and this is the other thing about insider risk management and even communication compliance is that we have strong and granular role-based access controls in place. So you can assign who gets to view what type of information within the solution. But in this case, imagine I have the permission to view this content, and it's typically legal within an organization that has the permissions to view this. But I can see here that, oh, look, this person is essentially this is highly sensitive data for this organization that they're trying to exfiltrate after they've submitted their resignation. And so this is something that I actually want to escalate for investigation. And right within the system, I've got integrated workflows that allow me to create a case, put a note in there, and once I create the case, it packages up all of this activity, all the content, and sends it to advanced eDiscovery for my legal team to take forward as the next step. The last thing I'll mention here is that insider risk management allows you to go back historically as well in terms of what activities were happening prior, even if an insider risk case hadn't been previously initiated against this user, because what we're doing is we're reasoning over the Microsoft 365 audit log. So we can go back up to 6 months from the date of a particular event. So if a resignation was submitted, I can go back 6 months to see what was Raman doing in the past, and I can certainly go forward. But that's another, I think, key differentiator for us.
That's great. Raman, before I have you conclude, I just want to remind people that they can ask their questions in the Q&A section as we're starting to hit the end of the presentation. So Raman, I mean, this looks great. It's intuitive to use. I know, when I've worked with some of the legal departments, that was one of the challenges, right? How do I make it easy for me to find the information we need? And yeah. I feel like I could actually do this stuff as well. But what should customers be doing next, as first steps to reduce their risk, and how can they get started?
Well, so we've got a number of ways. Certainly, if you have E5, both of these solutions are available in your tenant today. So I would encourage you to, go in, set up some policies, scope in some users. It's easy to trial. If you don't have E5, we've got an E5 trial here that we'll be sending out the links to. I would encourage you to have a conversation, by arranging a virtual meeting with our security and risk management teams in your accounts. Get a little more in depth with these particular products. Start a proof of concept. If you have Microsoft Information Protection, I would definitely encourage you to classify and label your content because that will help provide more context for both of these solutions. And finally, insider risk management and communication compliance. We've got a number of different assets out there, from videos to documentation, to help you through this process.
No, that's great, Raman. Thank you for sharing this. This is super helpful. We do have a question from Chris. Is there something that you can share on what's on the roadmap? You know, he's excited to see how far we've come. You know, what are some of the other exciting things that you know, we should be considering down the road? And that could be for Christophe or Raman.
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of things coming. Typically, when we think about our roadmap, we've got some stuff that is on our public roadmap today. You know, Christophe, maybe you want to take a couple that you have on the public roadmap that are there for communication compliance.
Yeah, but before, again, what I want to start is, as Raman mentioned, I think you can start using those solutions today. I know some of you, actually all of you, probably have some on-premises solution for supervision, and you're probably maybe not fully transitioned to the cloud. So, you know, definitely you can use those today. You want to roll out Teams, we got a solution for you to fulfill FINRA and SEC. You want to roll out Yammer, we got you. With regards to roadmap, as Raman mentioned, we already have plenty of items listed on a roadmap that you can look. If the question is, you know, specifically what are we investing in, you know, like Raman said, this is a key, and trust my word, and I can't share the numbers, but this is a key investment for us. So you're going to see a lot of innovations coming from the Redmond kitchen. So my question to that customer is, tell us specifically, reach out to your account team, tell us exactly what you're looking for, because maybe it's already coming pretty soon. But if it's more of a general question of what else is coming, like those pillars that we're showing you, intelligence, helping you collaborate seamlessly, having more signals, those are some of the themes that we have in those solutions that we're getting feedback day in, day out since we've launched those solutions 3 months ago.
That's great. Thanks for that, Christophe. Another question we had was just around the no signals or the no agents. How does that all work?
So Windows 1809 and higher, essentially what we're doing is we're leveraging the built-in capabilities of that particular machine, Windows Defender, that we can. You don't even have to have Windows Defender running in active mode for us to capture the signals, but the machine itself allows us to get signals related to copy to USB or printing or sending to, you know, a cloud application. And so we can gather those. What's gonna within the solution itself, you have the ability to onboard a managed device. And so if you've got a device that you're already managing through Intune, you can basically tell the solution that I wanna bring these devices into insider risk management. And once you do, then we can start getting those signals from those particular machines.
And I know that that's very top of mind, just from, you know, having the from a Windows PC perspective, reducing the amount of things that are running actively on your machine. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
huge to hear. Huge to hear that we're building it natively into the Windows operating system.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that, and I had a customer the other day that I was speaking to, and one of the biggest challenges they had was performance of their machines due to the number of agents that they were running. And so they took they were taking a big productivity hit. And interesting enough, some of their machines took up to 15 minutes to boot up. And so their CISO basically told their team that, look, going into their next fiscal year, which is starting in July, their number one mandate was to reduce the number of agents that were running on those machines. And so, but security and all these things were also top of mind. And so one of the things that they were looking at was insider risk management because of the no agent piece.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Raman, you also mentioned that E5 customers have access today. We had a question about, would they be able to access historical data, or would they have to build that, you know, upon deployment, meaning from that point forward?
So if you have Microsoft 365 auditing turned on already, then you don't have to build anything. We can look back, you know, 6 months. So if you have the audit logs already turned on, then we're good to go. If you don't have the audit log capabilities turned on, then yeah, you would have to build that capability moving forward. But I would suggest that, for everybody, go ahead and turn on the Microsoft 365 audit log capability. So at least you're building that historical context.
No, I think that, go ahead.
Sorry, Edwin. We actually had another question here in the chat window. Is communication compliance FINRA certified or vetted?
So yes, it can be used to fulfill FINRA requirements for proof of supervision. FINRA doesn't certify a solution, is my understanding, but it can fulfill. If you obviously that solution and the whole solution is also listed in the enterprise archiving solution from Gartner from the Magic Quadrant. So yes, you.
Yeah, that's great, Christophe. Actually, in my customer conversations, I know several customers that have already started to leverage communication compliance to meet some of that FINRA requirements there.
Absolutely.
No, what's great. I'm hearing, let's turn on logging and auditing. Let's capture that data just so you can get started. So I think that's a great way moving forward. In case this is something that you want to try out. I want to thank you, Raman and Christophe, for your presentation, for sharing with us, the latest and greatest on what's going on with communications compliance and insider risk. I'm really excited about, helping our customers out. For the rest of the audience, thank you for asking your questions. Thank you for participating. We're really excited about next week's topic. You can submit your feedback to AKMS/FSI Fridays feedback. And then we are also putting this up on a YouTube channel we just released, aka.ms/FSI Fridays recap. If you want to hear Raman and Christophe's lovely voice, you can go ahead and listen to that 24/7. So with that, thank you. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of the week, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
And just as a recap, episode 3 will be next week with the OneDrive scanning app, and the following week on June 26th is Microsoft shifts. So thanks again.
And more events to come in July. Thanks, everyone.